AP Environmental Science with Miss Haskins, Feeding the World. Feeding the World is a three-part series here where we talk about human nutritional needs, then modern large-scale farming methods, and then alternatives to industrial farming methods. So are there any alternatives to industrial farming methods? As problems in this industrial agriculture become more apparent, alternatives can gain more attention and typically become more profitable. So some of the newer techniques have actually been used in developing worlds as opposed to ours. So now we're going to examine what some of these developing nations are doing for alternative farming practices. And we'll look at a large-scale farming and meat and fish production. By the end of this unit, you should be able to describe some alternatives to conventional farming methods and also explain these alternative techniques used in farming animals and fishing and also aquaculture. Alternatives to industrial farming methods are gaining more attention. Industrial agriculture has been so successful and widespread that it has come to be known as the conventional agriculture. However, in situations in which the cost of labor is not the most important consideration, traditional farming techniques may also be economically successful. Small-scale farming is common in developing nations, where labor is less expensive and the machinery is far more expensive because of the cost of fossil fuels. In these countries, there are still many farmers who can grow crops in a small plot of land. And so traditional farming methods, which differ from those of our industrialized world, take place. Shifting agriculture, nomadic grazing, these are just a few ways that we consider sustainable farming. And the more sustainable methods like intercropping and agricultural forestry that we see, the better off a whole system can be. So this is exciting. Shifting agriculture and nomadic grazing. In locations where there's moderately warm climate and relatively nutrient-poor soils, like the rainforest of Central America, a large percentage of nutrients are contained within the actual vegetation. And so in these places, farmers sometimes use shifting agriculture, in which the land is cleared and it's used for only a few years until the soil is depleted of its nutrients. This traditional method of agriculture uses a technique that we call slash and burn, in which the existing trees and the vegetation, they're cut down, they're placed in large piles, and they're burned. The resulting ash is rich in potassium, calcium, magnesium, which makes the soil more fertile. And although these nutrients are usually depleted extremely quickly, and the deforestation occurs in an area of heavy rainfall, nutrients can be washed away along with some of the soil, which further reduces the availability of nutrients. But after a few years, the farmers usually move to another plot of land and repeat this process all over again. And if the plot is used for only a few years and then it's abandoned for a number of decades, over time the soil may recover and its organic content and its nutrient supplies can be restored. In semi-arid environments, dry, nutrient-poor soils can be easily degraded by agriculture to the point at which they can no longer be viable and they can no longer recover. So irrigation can cause this salinization process that we talked about, and so the topsoil is eroded away because the roots were too shallow, and so the annual crops usually fail and they don't hold the soil in place. All right, but the transformation of this arable productivity land to desert or unproductive land due to climate change or destructive land is what we call desertification or desertification. And this is a worldwide topic and worldwide process. But we do know one thing. Today's desertification is occurring most rapidly in Africa, where the Sahara is expanding at a rate of up to 50 kilometers, 31 miles per year. It's incredible. It's unsustainable farming practices in northern China as well. We're also leading to rapid desertification. And so the only sustainable way for people to use the soils like this in the very low productive area is by what we call nomadic grazing. And that's where we move herds of animals along this area and have them graze intermittently. And they have feeding grounds that are intermittent and scattered. So I'm sure you can imagine that some areas of the world are much more vulnerable to this process than others. So here we have a map of the world where there's very high vulnerability in certain areas and very low vulnerability. And so this may not be an answer for everybody, but it is an answer for some. Sustainable agriculture, it's possible. In addition to that, if we look at the severity of soil degradation, you can see that the map looks pretty similar. There's a very high level of severity of soil degradation and then a very low. And if we were to take these maps and lay them on top of each other, you would see that they would match up in most areas. So the severity of soil degradation, where it is low, the other map has a low or non-existent desertification process. I keep wanting to say desertification. I must have cheesecake on my mind. Desertification. Basically becoming a desert, right? That's what we're going to say from now on.